We've all seen them, right? Those grainy, shaky videos that pop up in our feeds, the ones claiming to capture something impossible. But what is it that makes them so genuinely scary? So in this breakdown, we're not here to prove or debunk anything. Instead, we're going to dig into the common themes, the patterns, and the narrative tricks from these videos people swore were real to really understand why they get under our skin.
This quote, it's pulled right from the source material and it really sets the stage perfectly. It's a challenge. It's telling us to lean in, to pay attention, promising something that just might be authentic, something that defies a simple explanation. It's kind of the perfect setup for what we're about to dive into.
All right, so our first big theme is also arguably the most powerful. You know, the stories that really stick with us, the ones that are deeply unsettling, almost always start in the one place we are all supposed to feel completely and totally safe, our own homes.
And that really gets to the heart of it, right? This question is what fuels so many of these clips. The fear isn't just about seeing something spooky. It's about the violation of your own private space. It's the terrifying idea that the lock on your front door means absolutely nothing to whatever is already inside with you. And this is a classic setup we see over and over. In stories like The Shadow Intruder or The Cursed Home, someone moves into a new place, full of excitement, only to get this slow, creeping realization that they are not alone. It's that awful thought that maybe, just maybe, the house already belongs to something else.
And of course, that all builds up to the big reveal. This line from the Cursed Home story, it's the perfect jump scare. A guy is checking out some weird noises, he thinks it's nothing, he turns back, and bam! There it is. That split-second terrifying glimpse of a face is exactly what makes a clip like this go viral. It's just built for that maximum shock value.
So as you can see here, we're breaking down the different kinds of home invaders that show up in these videos. And it's not always just a pale face in the dark. Sometimes it's a mimic, like the doppelganger pretending to be a loved one. Sometimes it's a featureless shadow gliding down the hall. Or it can be something physical, something aggressive, like a hand literally reaching out of a closet. But the common thread? It's always the invasion of a safe space. Now, you might have noticed the word jinn pop up in a few of these stories, including that really chilling doppelganger haunting. And that context is super important, because a jinn isn't just a lingering, passive spirit. In these stories, it's described as an intelligent, sometimes tricky entity that can imitate people. And that adds a whole other layer of psychological fear to the encounter. But, of course, the fear doesn't just stay inside the house. Our next category of clips takes the haunting outside, moving it into public spaces, places where we have way less control.
So now, the whole dynamic of the fear kind of changes. It's not so much about your personal sanctuary being violated anymore. It's more about the dread of what could be lurking in those unfamiliar places, places that are already a little creepy to begin with, like a deserted hospital wing or a long, dark road at night.
And what's fascinating is that a lot of these clips follow a really clear formula, and it's incredibly effective. You start with an unsettling, isolated setting. Then you add a weird sound or a strange figure in the distance to build that suspense. Then you get the big reveal, where the thing shows itself. And that, of course, triggers the final step, the frantic escape. It's pretty much a classic horror movie plot, just shrunk down into a 30-second video.
Yeah, hospitals are a huge one. They pop up all the time. And here, we've got two different takes on the exact same creepy setting, a closed-off hospital wing. In one story, the fear is of this thin, almost inhuman figure peeking around a corner. But in the other, it's a more tragic tale, a grieving woman in red, maybe a former patient looking for justice. It just goes to show how one location can create two totally different kinds of fear. The fear of the monster and the fear of a human story that's gone horribly wrong.
Okay, for our third theme, we're looking at encounters that aren't random at all. These are the stories where the paranormal activity seems to be specifically attached to an object or a place with a dark past. We're talking about cursed connections. And this is where things get really interesting, because it adds this layer of cause and effect. The horror here comes from the idea that the haunting was actually triggered by something the person did. They bought the wrong antique mirror, they visited the wrong cemetery, or they messed around with the wrong game. It gives you this feeling of responsibility and a deep sense of regret.
And these so-called gateways, they can be anything, right? We see stories about antique mirrors that show the wrong reflection, a wooden statue that supposedly talks by itself, and of course, there's the infamous Ouija board. Even a place, like a graveyard, can be the source,
with one story claiming a shadow literally followed someone home from their visit.
Man, this quote from the Ouija board story, it's just so powerful because it perfectly captures the vibe of this entire section. It's that dawning, sickening horror when you realize you've opened a door that you just can't close. The game might be over and packed away, but according to the story, the consequences, they're just getting started.
All right, this brings us to our last category, and honestly, for a lot of people, this is the scariest one. These are the stories that have no ending, the clips that just stop. They leave you with this deep sense of dread precisely because nothing ever gets resolved.
And the reason they're so effective? It's all about ambiguity. Think about it. When a story ends, even if it's scary, you get some closure. But when the footage just cuts to black, our minds are left to fill in the gaps. And let's be honest, what we imagine is almost always way, way worse than anything they could have shown on camera. So take the story of the vanishing investigator. It's a perfect case study. It's a slow burn. The guy goes into an abandoned asylum, he finds some weird evidence like strange footprints, his brand new flashlight dies, and then nothing. He's just gone. The only thing they find is his camera. And that footage turns us, the people watching, into the new investigators trying to figure out what happened in his final moments.
And that's the big question these clips leave you with, right? What happens next? In the basement encounter story, an urban explorer finds a creature with glowing eyes. The thing lunges at the camera and the video cuts out. We never see what happens, and that complete lack of information is what makes it so unbelievably terrifying. The suspense just hangs there, and it's never released.
And you know what? This isn't just a one-time gimmick. This idea of the person behind the camera disappearing is a powerful recurring theme. In at least two of the biggest clips we've looked at, the basement encounter and the vanishing investigator, the storyteller literally becomes the ghost story.
Ultimately, that's why these clips work so well. They escalate the fear beyond just witnessing something supernatural. They introduce the terrifying possibility of being consumed by it, of being taken. The threat is no longer just on the screen, it's the implied awful fate of the person who is holding the camera.
So, in the end, you have to wonder, does it even matter if these videos are real or not? They succeed because they are so perfectly tuned to our most basic primal fears. The fear of the dark, the fear of the unknown, and that stomach-turning dread of what happens right after the camera cuts out. The real question isn't whether we're seeing ghosts, but whether we're just looking at a perfect reflection of our own collective fear.